All right, so we're back. Topic right now is a planning commission meeting. As we were recording this, last night was the planning commission meeting. The big thing, I have not in person attended a planning commission meeting in a long time, but was there in person last night. I've watched a bunch of them online. Not that there's really any difference, but there is an interesting little dynamic there that we'll talk about later. But I know the biggest thing, probably even in the election, but also like for the planning commission, the biggest topic is zoning and like this big zoning rewrite that's happening right now. And so, I had a talk with actually my 10-year-old about this whole topic because he's like, because I went there last night, gave public comments. Yeah. He's like, what are you spending your time on? Like, where are you?
Awesome, by the way. Yeah, public comments.
Fire comments.
It's funny because like I realized when I was up there, by the way, like I was like, I know all but like 3 of these people, like personally. Yeah. I was like, I'm not, it's like, I love you guys. I'm like, I almost apologize in advance for what I was about to say. It's very important. It's, I think probably like minute for minute, if you're actually spending your time working on this, it's probably one of the more important things that impacts like the most people. So of course you're going to expect there to be a lot of strong opinions, a lot of people involved in that discussion. And our planning commission, listen, I gave public comments last night, and to be clear, because I don't expect everyone to go watch my public comments or anybody else's, but I was in favor of getting this zoning ordinance passed like now, as soon as possible at this point. Yep. But I also do appreciate it's a volunteer job being on that planning commission, and it is. I mean, those meetings are insanely long, and it requires so much of people to be on that. And so there is, again, just like we talked about before in the election, there's a lot of respect for anybody who's willing to put themselves through that. And honestly, the longer you do it, like the more I do respect that you are willing to put that effort in, because I don't think anybody on that planning commission is uneducated or not paying attention.
Correct.
So like they're doing the job from the perspective of like being prepared. Yeah. They're doing their homework at least.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's kind of funny, like from like I think of like this is like I used to like do other podcasts, and like the producer mind of me is like discussing a planning commission meeting is like the most boring thing for a listener. So we got to find a way to make it interesting, but I think we probably have an angle because this is going to shape. Here's the thing, and this is something that I learned again after I didn't care about any of this stuff. And I'm kind of buying time until Mike finds what he's looking for.
What are you doing over here?
He's got like 8 tabs.
I think we just need to start the segment over.
No.
Reference stuff. I don't want to be like, hold on, let me look it up.
No. It's fine. But no, but genuinely, I didn't know. Like, I didn't really care about any of this stuff until I moved here and like saw how it was affecting things.
Yeah, totally.
Because the smaller the town, the more that stuff matters. But again, this town is bananas. and people are upset, but interestingly, like I went to a public forum Monday night for Lisa Garamoni. She did her own event to let people ask her any question they wanted to in person without any preparation. Mm-hmm. She's willing to be held accountable for whatever answer she gives. And I went to the planning commission last night. It's almost all NIMBYs, or maybe YIMBYs, and I'm a YIMBY. The reason why I care to be selfish and like transparent. The reason why I like this zoning is some of the things that are going to be in my backyard. I actually want those things. There's people who those same things they don't want.
And just to clarify the acronyms, NIMBY is not in my backyard.
Yep.
YIMBY is yes in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
These are we didn't make these up. These are like, if you read any like zoning stuff nationwide, like these are like pretty common terms for
urban planning
planning professionals and people who go up against stuff like we're dealing with now, zoning
Yeah.
ordinance changes and like big sweeping kind of like visionary, like directional changes that a town is considering.
Yeah. All right. So Mike, maybe can you give us like, and I know it's difficult, like a 2 or 3 minute kind of like version of like why this whole like zoning rewrite is happening, like kind of like the backstory of like what led up to all of this stuff, and then we'll kind of go from there. But I got some questions for Chris too.
So like the non-technical, non-boring answer is that every commissioner on the Board of Commissions right now ran 2 years ago on the premise that they will fix the zoning. The reason why is because our zoning was so horrible. It was literally causing mayhem with traffic. It was nothing but strip malls and cookie cutter subdivisions. One of my favorite favorite descriptions of Nolensville, it's not actually a town, it's just a collection of subdivisions, right? Because like we live in Bank Creek, you lived in Bank Creek. Like Bank Creek is a little town in itself, and there's another smaller Bank Creek just up the street in Scales, and there's another, they're just collection of subdivisions. And outside those subdivisions, it's one road, it's zoned the same way, it's just strip mall after strip mall after strip mall, and everyone that has to get to that strip mall has to get on that same road and has to either drive south or north to get to it. So everyone realized that the zoning was mayhem, and like there is aspects of bad zoning because people didn't know any better, and there's just an aspect that was just, it was written a while ago. The updates weren't happening drastically enough like they should have been, and like we had a whole entire zone. We had this principle of like every time we annex a property in, we would annex them in as estate residential, and essentially making them undevelopable.
Yeah.
And it was like a placeholder, and it was set up that way because the zoning was the basic zoning was so incomplete that we wanted everybody to come in as a planned unit development so that we get to plan each subdivision, right? We didn't want to have an all-encompassing code that people can just have by right. We wanted our fingerprints on every little aspect of every subdivision.
So pause for a second. Just I'm gonna like play dumb so I can like make sure people who are listening that are dumb like me know.
Yeah.
So you said plan unit development, PUD, PUD, we might say.
Right.
So in the future, that's a good reference. Like that's kind of like it's like a special thing that like needs the Board of Commissioners or Board of Mayor and Aldermen to like review it uniquely, right? It's like
Right.
consider it specially a unique thing, off
Right.
from zoning, kind of.
So it's the idea behind it is that the parcel that's being developed can't be developed to ideal standards, so they have to write their own zoning in order to do it in the most optimal way. And it's up to the boards, both PC and then BOMA at the time, to accept their zoning, their small zoning rewrite for that parcel.
Okay, great. Sorry to stop you.
Yeah.
I think it's a great description. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like BOMA actually favored PUDs.
Our whole entire zoning
Yeah.
was written to force everybody.
Almost
to go.
every neighborhood that you see in existence in Nolensville today was a PUD.
Bennington was the only one under
Yeah.
BOMA that was not a PUD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but BOMA favored them mainly because it opened up from my understanding, just and watching meetings historically, it opened up a negotiation.
Yeah.
So it basically forced the developer to come to the table and be willing to make some concessions on things. It allowed BOMA to have their finger, so to speak, on how the development would look, feel, build out,
And-
whether it would connect to another neighborhood or not,
and who and when, right?
Yes.
So they were able to decide who
who built at
built
what
it.
time.
and at what time. Which I actually don't hate the process. I like the idea of micromanaging the big, like if another Bank Creek comes along, I like the idea of two boards coming together and micromanaging the type of project. Just because you shouldn't have cookie cutter stuff.
Yeah.
But to continue on with the zoning stuff, every member of the BOC ran on the premise of changing it. They hired a really good consultant, a consultant that's very well known. They actually designed West Haven. I think they did Columbia's zoning. I think they're doing Cool Springs rezoning. And
What they do in Florida too.
they do a bunch in Florida. The guy that Brian Wright, the guy that's the chief operating officer there, actually worked under Mr. Speck that wrote Suburban Nation, which is like the gospel for urban planners, right? It's about like mixed use and solvency and just it's a really nice, it's a really good company. And Haley Gillick was actually on the committee that hired them, which was shocking. But now there's this big push because the zoning rewrite is such a drastic change that all the NIMBYs are saying that this company sucks. Like this company's no good. They gave us a boilerplate zoning update. They didn't do a good job. Brian's not a good speak. Like it's just like, basically trashing a guy that's like
nationally known.
Right, but like regionally accepted as the top dog of zoning. Yeah, so now we're in a place where we went from land use zoning, so zoning in a way that allows different types of uses in different places, right? So you have your commercial zones where you can only have commercial, you have your residential zones, you can only have residential, office and industrial, government services. It was all very separate, all very unique in its sense. And we're going,
It's like little like blotches on a map, basically.
Right.
Like this is here, then there's a line. This is here.
right, and then it needs a buffer between like this use. It needs a 75-foot buffer between this use, and it's very old school. I mean, it's very 1960s, 70s, 80s, right? It's that very cookie cutter type of zone. And this new zoning is form-based zoning. It doesn't necessarily care what the use is. It cares what it looks like. So that's why they call it character districts. So it focuses on the aesthetics of the streetscape, the height of the building, the setbacks between the buildings, the setback from the road. It doesn't really care what happens inside the building, which I think that's fair. Like why does the government care what happens inside the building, as long as obviously like you have your nuisance, right? So you don't want to have like a lithium ion plant next to a daycare that backs up to a subdivision, right? That makes no sense. So there is public safety issues there that this zoning ordinance addresses. But like the government shouldn't care if like you have an office in like a mixed use development on the first floor and then you live upstairs. Like why would the government care about that?
So to kind of like equate this back to something interesting that I think a lot of people who might watch or listen to this would relate to. What you're saying is like the free market is an effective way of determining what works or doesn't work in many situations. In other words, the government doesn't need to. Not that they should or shouldn't even. They don't need to.
Right. To your point.
Yeah, exactly. They can protect public safety, but I think a lot of people who are maybe against some of these zoning issues, at the same time would be proponents of the concept of free market, and I am a bleeding heart liberal. I'll admit it right on this podcast. Yeah, sorry guys. But at the same time, I'm not free market to a certain extent, especially in small towns, where again I like small business. I like the idea of being an entrepreneur. All those kinds of things. I think they should be left alone. And if you want to build a business and you can support it, I don't think the government should not let you do that. Again, as long as it's not a real.
I think
issue.
a great example of how our zoning wasn't working was the you're gonna have to help me with the name. What's the candle shop?
Nella Moon.
Nella Moon.
Oh yeah.
So I when I was still involved in the brewery, I watched the gentleman who was trying to redevelop that particular building, and he came in with this concept of wanting like a retail shop downstairs, and then like he was going to split level it with like
office space,
and it was going to be like a doctor or like some sort of medical use. It was
upstairs.
A med spa or something. I think we don't have to mention exactly what it was going. So it was going to be a very specific.
It was. Let's just say it was for women.
Yes.
For women only.
Yeah.
But
very trendy thing for women only.
Yeah.
But not only did he run into some like issues with like how many parking spaces he had to have, but like also there was like this pushback on, well, like the retail works. that's allowed in the historic district, but like the office space and that particular use doesn't really work.
And in fact, there was
And-
going to be 2 stories instead of 1.
Correct. And so there were just all these issues of like, I mean, and I remember sitting in the BOMA meeting, looking at this presentation and seeing this like beautiful architecture. Like he was taking this rundown, crappy looking old building and rehabbing it, putting a bunch of money into it, and the building looks fantastic now. It looks awesome.
Calling it a building from what he started is being kind
of but like Joanna Gaines would like marvel at like the redesign of this building.
He went farm style chic all the way. Yeah.
Like and it's beautiful. And like Nella Moon is a beautiful shop. I've bought a lot of candles there. But the moral of the story is like the zoning as it was did not allow him as a business owner and as an entrepreneur to come in and like optimize the space. And so I think we had a lot of people running after the charter change who all looked at situations like that, because that's a dime a dozen. It happened a million times. And said, you know what, enough is enough. We have to do something about zoning, because like our town is not going to move forward. We're not going to get the kind of businesses that we really want if we have this zoning issue.
Dude, I just thought of something. We have to mention this because it's going to resonate with pretty much 14 out of the 15,000 people living in this town. The greatest example of bad zoning is that empty parking lot just down the road from there. That parking lot only exists 100%. Because Pork Belly was originally supposed to be office space or something like that. They weren't supposed to be a restaurant at first. And because he changed uses mid-project, a different parking lot requirement or parking spot requirement got applied to a restaurant, and he needed more parking spots. So he took that empty lot there and created a parking lot with a pad, like an envelope pad, for a building that he has absolutely no intention of building. And like that, and that is the very heart of our town. Right now, there's a storage shed from Smuckers that you can take photos in front of. So it kind of works for like 2 months out of the year. But that is an empty parking lot in the heart of our historic district that everybody loves and claims that's the small town charm. And it's there because of horrible zoning. So it needed to be changed.
But that parking lot is the butt of more jokes online. Like than most things in town.
Like, so forget the broken wheel. Just put the empty parking lot.
So let's talk a little bit more though now. Let's move to zoning rewrite, kind of what that's happened. And I know that we're probably going to have to make this like 2 segments here because we're already running up on close to time. I know, right? But to kind of catch us up to speed right now, most important things are about a year ago from when we were recording this, the town took the first steps or the kind of started the process of rewriting all the zoning, addressing these issues, this craziness. The idea that traffic is horrendous. Part of that is because there's a ton of suburban sprawling neighborhoods with strip malls that serve them all, with parking lots, and that's pretty much our town. You could continue down that path, and we've already seen what that path gets us because we're in it right now. We live it every day. Or do we do something different? And the zoning rewrite was an attempt to kind of codify, however you say it, that idea of doing something different. So I know about a year ago, Nolensville had an event called Planapalooza, which was like a several-day event where they invited basically anybody who wanted to show up to provide input and get involved and provide their ideas and really kind of kick off the process of discussing what needs to be done. Again, concrete ideas, solutions. It was as far as I know, there was no like. It wasn't a complaint fest about traffic. We all know what the issues are. No, in fact, I don't think anybody like on any side of any issue here in town has a disagreement about like what the issues are or what the problems are.
Right.
And I think again to kind of go back to what we had talked about in a previous segment about the election, like trying to make people agree with you is not like a platform for getting elected. Like no one's disagreeing with traffic is bad, at rush hour or at lunchtime on Nolensville Road on the weekends or whatever you want to say. It was an attempt to have concrete new ideas because we know what we've gotten already. Let's try something new. And so they had that process about a year ago.
Yeah.
And you guys stop me or tell me when I'm wrong, because I know
It was probably over. It was like August, probably.
yeah. And so they had that event, and then they kind of like collected concepts. I even read the notes of like public feedback on all of that stuff.
I went to like pretty much every single meeting in Palooza. Yeah.
Was interestingly enough, this was in my public comments at the planning commission meeting last night, but there's a gentleman who has been very vocal about his opposition to
Right.
rushing their zoning rewrite, and how no one knows about all this stuff, and it almost felt like an episode of Parks and Rec, like when they have like the public forums for people. It literally felt like this, because he volunteered to everyone that, yeah, I know no one knows about this. Yeah, I know that I knew about the Planapalooza event and I didn't go.
Yeah.
And yeah, I knew about the planning commission meeting after that, and yeah, I didn't go to that either.
Yeah.
But I'm still mad
Right.
that no one, it's like, dude,
My opinion wasn't heard
yeah, it's like
at
it's
all
like,
the opportunities that I
yeah,
had to give it.
yeah, and so it's very frustrating. But anyway, this zoning rewrite is an attempt to fix problems and set a vision for the future. We hired consultants, TPUDC,
Right.
who, again, you've already talked about their credentials, and they delivered a document, a 400 and something page document, with basically a plan, back in June, early June, I believe.
Earlier mid-June.
Early June. And we're recording this in like the middle to late July of October, not July. And so it's been a long time. I did the math on my statements last night, but they delivered a document. So far, up to before the planning commission meeting last night, there have been around 50 amendments already to this document.
Right.
That have been made. And then we had the meeting last night. They originally were planned to have already voted on this, and then this would have already been passed on to the Board of Commissioners to vote on.
Yep.
The second reading would have been next month,
Yep.
and that would have been it, right?
Yep. But it's already been pushed back.
You would need a public hearing in there, but you don't technically have to have it on a separate month. So you can do November first reading, mid-November or late November public hearing, early December second reading, and it's done.
Right. So technically, we could be getting close. We could have been getting close
Yep.
on getting this done, but based on my read of what happened even last night, we're not as close as we hoped. Some of us had hoped. I know some people want it to take longer.
And I think it's important for people to understand, so why this is happening now is not just because we had an election a couple years ago and the government changed, right? This is also happening now because with new people coming in, there was a realization not only that our zoning was bad or just outdated, but also that there's only so much land available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think as people looked at both the financial realities of the town, which are limited, just by the scope of how we're currently set up, and we're mainly driven by residential revenue and not commercial, how much land is left to be developed. And I also think it was eye-opening for a lot of people that got elected how many developers were actually banging on the doors that were just being turned away.
Yeah, they didn't know. You don't know until you're inside that.
Once people got involved, and all of a sudden they saw oh, people actually really want to build here, and are being told no, for various reasons, or being told no because they just can't get around the zoning as it is. So I think the reason that there's a lot of disagreement right now on the future of zoning is mainly because people know on both sides of this issue that the way that we set out going forward means that limited available land is going to develop in a certain way. And yeah, that can potentially change the way the town looks. But I think what a lot of people don't understand, and where there's a lot of misinformation, is it can also change the financial future of this town for the good or for the better. When you have a limited resource like land, and that land gets used or eaten up because it's developed a certain way, now you're locked in. It can only be developed that way, and it will only produce whatever that use is. And so if we don't look strategically at how those parcels get developed, we are locking ourselves into a financial future, maybe 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, that's very dangerous. And honestly, I think back to an earlier segment and another conversation we had, that's why this election is so important, is having people that understand that reality.
Well,
Huge.
Let's talk a little bit about. I would like to get into. We're going to run up on time, so we got to reset cameras one more time. I think we should do one more segment on this because it's important. But I want to talk a little. I think the salient point in all of this is a financial discussion.
Yeah.
Of what our current zoning allows for right now look like 10 years from now versus what does, let's say the dirty word, density. What does that afford the town that again, we're dealing with limited land. That's a key point, is that there's only so much. This is not a huge square miles.
Yeah, we're talking 10 square miles.
It's not very big.
Yeah.
And so and so let's talk about like fiscal responsibility and what that looks like, and why we have a golden opportunity maybe right now to do something that everyone's threatening about. Oh, once you do this, you can never go back. But also, I think from a positive side, if we can make the right choices, if we do this right now, we never will have to go back.
Right.
So let's take a pause, and then we'll jump back in and we'll talk about that. All right, we're back. So we talked about how we're going to kind of discuss the financial side of a zoning degree, right? And density in particular, why that matters. There's a lot of people who are very anti-density. Interestingly, there's not a ton of people who are like aggressive about like pro-density. And I don't know if that's because maybe they don't understand the benefits of it, or if it's more just the nature of people who you're more fired up when you don't like something than you are when you like something.
Yeah. So to me, density, the reason residential, I've always subscribed to this line of thought. Residential is the devil you put up with in order to corner commercial, right? So, and the town has practiced this principle since its incorporation, right? So you approve enough residential units to corner in a Publix, a Kroger, right? Because those are the money makers. Density works because I think Derek said it last night. Like Carmel, Indiana did a study, and it shows that mixed-use development produces 60% more, or 60 times more, revenue than a traditional strip mall with a subdivision behind it. It works because it creates, people always will shop locally, right? Like you said, like you focus in on shopping locally. You want to help out small businesses. And if Summerlin is where you live, if Summerlin had a coffee house on Summerlin Drive, like, would you drink coffee anywhere else?
No,
like,
every time.
You're walking there, and then that's the principle, is people draw to their neighborhoods. Like, I lived in Chicago for like 17 years, and the running joke in Chicago is it's this huge city, but you live within 6 blocks. Like, you don't venture out. You have your bars, you have your coffee houses, you have your lunch spot, breakfast. Like, it all happens within the 6 blocks of each other. And that's the way mixed use works, is that the majority of your life happens close by. And you don't put the strain on public services because you're not driving the roads, you're not having accidents 10 miles out. You're supplementing the economy because you're more drawn to spending money locally. So like, I brew my own coffee because I'm not going to start up my car and drive a mile down the road. Like, it's just not, like, easy to brew coffee. But if a coffee house was within a 3-minute walk of me, like, I'm not brewing coffee. I'm gonna go spend the $3 on a coffee, right? So you're stimulating the economy that way. The financial part of that is, so I told you guys that like during the break when you guys were setting the cameras, I told you that this is gonna be the first time I'm gonna disagree with you on a podcast, and I don't believe that land is finite or a finite resource here. I think that if you look at Franklin, it's like 200 something years old. Brentwood was incorporated in the 50s. like we are only like 25, 26 years old. Like this is the baby version of Nolensville. It's
Right.
going to continue to grow. Like Triune can't incorporate anymore. I don't think there's like a law that after Nolensville incorporated, the state changed the incorporation laws to where you need to be able to like have your own fire or your own police department.
Yeah.
Like Triune's just not going to incorporate. Like we eventually will have the opportunity to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and the 10 square miles has the potential to go into 40, 50 square miles.
Sure.
So like I don't believe that land is this as scarce as it is, and I also don't think that it's make it or break it. I'm actually watching what's happening with the rezone. I'm actually in favor of just scrapping it and saying, screw it, wait. Like if we can't agree, if this is causing this much issue, and if we can't agree on a simple common sense idea that density will pay for itself, and that mixed use is infinitely better than a big box store, then it's pointless even coming to a debate table. Because if one side thinks that the Nolensville charm is a Home Depot on Kidd and Nolensville Road, and that's the way to fix traffic and stimulate the local economy, then it's pointless even compromising from that starting point.
Yeah.
If I had it my way, if I was the czar of Nolensville, I would say, let's stop it. Let's not grow our borders right now. Let's not give vested rights further. Let whatever happens with our crappy current zoning until we as a town agree that the common sense thing to do is to stop the sprawl, stop the infinite resource drain of like spreading people further apart from each other, and agree that if you want a town and if you want a small town charm, you have to draw people closer together. Like, so the thing about the small town charm is that people constantly refer to it as Nolensville. It's our small town charm. Like, you don't think freaking Franklin has small town charm? Like every time I go there, I'm like giggling the whole time. It's like dumb Mayberry, right? You're walking down the sidewalk, like this is phenomenal. I feel like I'm in some sitcom. Like they have small town charm. They're much bigger than us. It's all mixed use. Like they have cool springs that is just apartment on top of apartment. Like why? Like it. That what drives me nuts is that the starting point of the discussion is such a laughable point that I'm just not willing to discuss it at this point anymore. It's like, if you're telling me that your idea of fixing Nolensville is to have a big box store on one of the most premier and legendary corners of Nolensville, like that's the Nichols corner, right? Like if you're telling me that your idea for Nolensville, your vision for Nolensville is to zone that to where you have a big box store, like that's a joke. Like it's 2022. I haven't bought anything other than food and maybe like hardware store stuff, like lumber or building materials that wasn't online since like 2020. Like you just don't buy anything inside of big boxes anymore.
Well, I do think, and not to interrupt,
No, you go ahead.
like I do think to your point, Brentwood, older municipality, Franklin, older municipality,
Way older, all right.
but I do think that it's interesting. Like we always like run into this issue of like comparing ourselves to Brentwood or Franklin and saying like, well, we don't want to be like Franklin, or some people say we don't want to be like Franklin. We don't want to be Brentwood. And then some people are like, well, like we do want to be like Brentwood or Franklin. And I think there's probably a mix when you look at like, if you were to poll everyone that lives here, there's probably a mix of like that sentiment.
Right.
But I do think what's interesting is like, fine, maybe we don't want to be exactly like either one of those places, but they've existed a lot longer than either of us. So it at the end of the day, like they have gone through all of the growing pains. They have gone through all of these debates. And if you look right now, what they are currently trying to figure out how to place in their municipalities, it's mixed use. Both of them. Like Franklin has some big mixed use going on like the what I guess it's the eastern side of the city.
The whole McEwen area, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Brentwood is like trying to figure out how to do some mixed use stuff. Obviously, like there's debates going on in those two places about like whether or not they want apartments or more apartments or how big they're getting and all that kind of stuff. But I think the realities is Franklin realized at some point that, hey, the financial ramifications of building suburban sprawl with just single family homes and big box shopping centers is not sustainable.
Right.
Even in a place where you're located right off a highway and you're drawing tons and tons of traffic from other places. So
and you have all the history behind you.
right. Yeah. So I think it's important for people to understand that, like, the proponents of saying that like mixed use is the way to go. We're not just coming at this from like we're young and like we grew up living in the city at some point in our lives, like 10 years ago. And so like, or you grew up in Chicago and so you want to bring like these like urban politics to like Nolensville. Like, it's not that at all. It's literally just like, this is a playbook that we're looking at other municipalities that at some point were smaller, have a historic downtown, and also they are now saying like, look, this is the way to maximize what land you have available. Yeah. And like Franklin doesn't have, like, yes, they can annex, you know, the same way Nolensville can annex into the future. Franklin has their own boundaries. So they're trying to figure out what to do with what land they have left and how to maximize its use from a revenue standpoint. I think Nolensville should be asking those questions. And I don't disagree with you. I think Nolensville will probably be much bigger in the future than we are now. And so like there is opportunity for us to grow the boundary and like from a revenue standpoint increase in that same way. But if we simply take the playbook we're playing by right now and simply expand the boundary, guess what we get? Just bigger problems.
Right.
Like the current playbook that we are operating from does not work because we are sitting 20 years in and we have a financial issue that we have to figure out how to deal with, or else 20 years from now, we're just going to be 40 years old and have the same problems, if not worse.
Yeah. So two points. Number one, like you talked about having a playbook. I used to do a lot of work. I had a side business where I used in a previous life, I was a professional drummer, and I was teaching drummers how to become professional musicians. Mm-hmm. And, even here in Nashville, like becoming a professional musician is perceived as like one of the most impossible things to do. It's very hard to do. But what I taught people and what led to other people's success and what led to my success was finding people who were successful at doing those things and then saying what are the common threads.
Yep.
And what did they do, even a very difficult thing. And honestly, I think becoming a professional musician is harder than being a fiscally solvent town.
Yeah.
It's statistically less likely to be a professional musician than it is for a town to be solvent. But you've got to have a playbook, you've got to have a plan. Doesn't mean you have to be the same thing as that. I could look at the drummer who was the drummer for Justin Timberlake or whoever. I probably sound old by just even saying that, but like, it doesn't mean I'm going to be that artist's drummer. It means I'm going to do something similar as far as like what I'm able to achieve. That's all I think what you're saying. We have a playbook. We're not trying to copy Franklin or Brentwood. We're not trying to be those things.
We're trying to take stuff that worked and apply it to our situation.
Yeah, we're trying to accomplish goals that are similar. I think that's probably a fair way of describing it. You said you were going to disagree with us, and then you mentioned that you don't necessarily disagree with Mike about the idea we could expand our footprint as far as, and I've mentioned this before. Again, I said in a previous segment even about how I have a terrible memory, so I have like mantras that I live by, or when I find an idea that I love, I kind of like see everything through that lens. I was introduced to the idea of like what they call it, the development Ponzi scheme or whatever. The idea of like,
you need to keep growing.
Yeah, we all know what a Ponzi scheme is, right? Where like you have a fake investment vehicle where you trick people into saying, hey, I can guarantee you a certain return if you just invest your money. And what you've really done is you've made that lie before. And when I get your money, I just say, Chris, I can guarantee your investment, and you give me all your money, and I've already guaranteed Mike the same return. I have no way of doing that, so I just take your money and give more to Mike so he gets his return. And then since I've got your money, and oh no, and now I've got to figure out how to give Chris his money back, I have to go find somebody else to take their money. And that's from a development fiscal perspective, that's what Nolensville has been doing for a couple of decades now, with our current path. And so what I see, like you mentioned, like if we continue down the same path and we do expand our footprint, that just causes more problems. Like metaphorically, what I see that is like you've run out of investors, and now you've got to take on debt.
Right.
to pay that.
Yeah.
And you've taken out a loan now because you just all of a sudden acquired a liability that you don't really know
Yeah.
right now what you're going to do about it. So you just borrow from somebody else. And I think that's like the biggest, like, I alluded to this like when I was like teasing this segment, but like the opportunity we have right now is that like there are enough people who are looking and saying, like, sounding alarm bells, like right now we can foresee a yes, we have you mentioned like whatever $27 million in the bank or whatever it is right now, but look at how we've gotten here. Like there is a limit to achieving what we have right now, and we need to do something different.
Yep.
Because this method of achieving what we've gotten will not last.
Yeah.
So we've got to think about something different. All right. But let's move on a little bit because we got to cover like the actual planning commission meeting last night.
Yeah.
All right. So they've had a chance a few times to look at the zoning rewrite. They've kind of pushed back several times. Last night, can anyone really make sense of what happened?
The same thing has been happening. It's one of those things where it's like if you want to prolong the process, what you do is you start debating things that don't really mean much to most people. They mean a lot to the people presenting it, but they take on that they are willing to die on that hill, right? So it's like it could be light bulb hues, it could be parking minimums, right? So they take on this, they take on the issue and they fight and fight and fight, and they know that there's a time limit because in their bylaws they cannot vote past 10:30.
Mm-hmm.
So the more time you kill, the more likely is that you have to pass on.
I think I listened to a 30-minute debate on whether or not we could have a 3 or 4-story building based on the pitch of the roof.
If it was an attic roof.
So like, I mean, it's finding like just kind of ancillary topics or ancillary things that you can bring up for amendment.
Yeah.
That was the strategy, at least I saw last night. It was like, what are the ways that I can angle this argument and like just draw this out so that we don't actually have to vote on this thing tonight.
Yeah, and so like I'll preface this by saying that I'm like comically impatient. Like I'm the most impatient person in the world. To me, these meetings are the most ineffective use of anyone's time, and these meetings, if you watch any other meetings, if you watch the school board, the county commission, anything, it's always Robert's rules are you get the floor, you present your amendment, you get a second, you have the opportunity to weigh in why you presented the amendment or explain the amendment, and then everybody votes. Like there's rules where everybody gets the floor twice for 5 minutes if it's like a heated topic, but it's supposed to be present the amendment, explain the amendment, vote. And we don't do it that way. We like I saw Travis Blunt yesterday trying to write an amendment on a spot. He was like, "Are you guys okay with 4 units? Do you guys want to do net density or net density or gross density?"
Yep.
And so he like, dude, one of them's in like you don't have to talk about this because one of them is already in the zoning ordinance. So either propose a change or shut the hell up at that point. Like he's trying to write the ordinance as you're sitting there, and it takes 25 minutes for him to like apologize profusely for the entire time, and it drives me nuts. Watching these meetings drives me up a wall because it's like, even if you're not trying to kill time, what you're doing is you're killing time until you run out of time and you can't vote on this.
Well, you're only you can only like claim ignorance until you're not ignorant anymore. Maybe this is one more time where like you can be called out. You know what I mean? Like you can say, "Oh, I really care about this," but now here it is. Oh, hey, even if you didn't know before, now you know.
Yeah.
Like you're killing, and like, I mean, that was my public comments last night.
Right.
Was you are. Like, whether you mean to or not, you are wasting time on things that don't matter. And it's not like, it's not a hard, again, we talked about how we're going to talk about the things that people won't talk about. Like, Travis Blunt was definitely an opponent of much of what Better Nolensville was doing, and was very much associated with people who were doing things their way. And so it's not a far stretch to assume that he does not want the zoning rewrite to happen at all.
Right.
Because that's pretty much the crowd that is against.
And found every angle he could take to stall and
I mean,
amend.
what did they do yesterday? They hedged that even if they pass it, the BOC cannot vote on this until they have another meeting to pass the minutes. That's like the biggest
So
crock of crap.
let's take a time out because that's like very. I think it's very important. We got to explain that in detail. So they established a condition basically last night that said, even if we pass this zoning ordinance, us meaning the planning commission, we also need another meeting to approve the minutes of this meeting before the Board of Commissioners can vote to pass this.
Yeah, and I think for context, the way this normally goes, right, is Planning Commission, or the PC, as we like to call them, Planning Commission passes anything that's supposed to go on. They pass a plan. That plan is a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners to then like codify the plan, right? Board of Commissioners actually makes it legal. So the Planning Commission last night, somehow, I don't know if this is legal or not, somehow our town attorney thinks it's legal. We'll find out.
Yeah.
But the Planning Commission, that's not good. The normal system isn't good enough, according to a few of their standards. And so what they put in place was, even if we vote on this tonight and we recommend it to the BOC, we want to wait until town staff takes the time to write up all the minutes, which usually takes a few weeks. So there's a delay.
Yeah, because they have to watch it, record it.
Because they have to watch the meeting, write all the minutes out, and then publish the minutes publicly. And then the chair of the Planning Commission, because he's the only one legally allowed to call a special meeting, will call a special meeting.
The one whose idea was to do this?
Correct.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
and he's the one who brought this particular condition up. And so his idea was like, here's this condition. I'm the only one that can call the meeting to vote on the minutes, and we won't let the BOC actually vote on this until these minutes are approved. And let's just hope that 9 people's schedules can actually align.
Well, let's.
Because I also heard the chair say last night that he couldn't make a certain date for a meeting because of his own personal schedule.
Yeah, let's stretch our imaginations and play devil's advocate. What non-delay related reason is there for putting that condition on? What is?
There's none.
Can you imagine a reason why?
If I was tasked to come up with a reasonable reason to get my base to at least not laugh at me for it, would be like, I want everyone to read through the minutes to realize what they did. Like, right? So you want everyone to kind of sleep on it.
Isn't that kind of like arrogant though?
It's extremely demeaning
Like,
to people up there voting on this stuff.
Sure.
Like I know better than you. You need to think about what you know.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Like my BS detector just is like off the charts when I like listen to this back after watching it last night, because I was already enraged last night when I saw this happening live.
Yeah.
But like just hearing it again, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this actually happened.
I didn't hear it wrong.
But you have to think about it in context, right? The chair of the PC was asking for this condition to be put in place that he controls the timeline of, right?
Not the timeline. He controls the when it happens, right? So
That's the timeline.
I'm an immigrant. I'm an immigrant.
But he controls when this happens, and that is after they just heard an hour's worth of public comments of people telling the PC, slow the zoning ordinance down. Yeah. Slow it down. Slow it down. Slow it down. Yeah. So literally, like, there are. And at another point in the meeting, the chair also spoke up and said, I can't vote in conscience on some particular parts of the zoning ordinance because I keep hearing people say that they want us to slow this down, or I'm not in favor of this.
So let me call that out because I was there last night.
Yep.
My perception was the public comments were about 50-50 on stop delaying and start. But let me say this though. So stop delaying or slow it down. So 50-50 on what they want the PC to do. If you're on that PC, you're going to hear what you want to hear, right? You're going to hear what
you get empowered, but you get empowered by opinion, right?
Right. Yeah. So, but the thing that gets me is, I heard again. I was at a public forum for Lisa the other night, and I heard so many questions that were doubting the zoning rewrite that equated. They said, for example, we're going to put, if we get higher density, the schools are going to have to be rezoned because they're overcrowded. And our kids who expect to go to this school, their friends aren't going to go there anymore.
Yeah.
And I asked the question, well, if the zoning doesn't happen, are the schools not going to be overcrowded anymore? The answer was no. It's this equation of let's find a problem with the other side and point out that that's a problem with their side without acknowledging that the same problem. It's like a math equation for me.
Sure.
It's literally like if both sides of the equal sign have the same, have opposites or the same whatever, you eliminate it.
Right.
It's the same idea. It's like if it's true about both sides, then you don't need to talk about it.
Right.
You don't have a point.
There is no point. And I've seen that so many times with this zoning ordinance. It's if you do this is good. If you do this, traffic is going to be a problem 5 years from now. Well, guess what?
Right.
Traffic's going to be a problem 5 years from now because of what decisions were made 10 years ago.
Right.
Right.
Not anything to do with the zoning.
Right.
The zoning's trying to fix that.
I think my biggest problem with the meeting last night, and then we can wrap up because I'm sure we're close, but like my biggest problem, and this goes back to some stuff we were talking about, in another segment or episode, like what I heard from a lot of people who are anti-growth or anti-density or that kind of side of the debate was a lot of talk about the number of units and how big something can be built on a piece of land if this amount of acreage can be used and this amount of acreage is floodplain, but they can count all the density. Like I heard a lot of like talk about like just how things are going to look and feel, and I heard very little talk about what zoning really needs to be focused on, which is how is it going to financially impact the town.
Yeah.
And so like I think you have some people involved that are making a very good case for why we should zone a certain way because it is creating the most adaptable environment for us to actually grow as a town in a fiscally responsible way that gives us the best opportunity to get the most revenue extracted from what land we have right now.
Yeah.
And then I hear a bunch of people saying, well, yeah, but if we go that way, like the town is going to look different or it's going to feel different. And it's like, yes, it will. That's just a fact. Like we can't change that for anyone, but like I think everyone needs to understand, like if we don't go that way, we risk like some very big and real things happening, which is like the town's going to feel really different if you have a fire at your house and we don't have an adequate fire department because we can't actually fund it at the level that it needs to be.
Yeah.
The town's going to feel very different if you don't have a police, patrol at a certain hour of night.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's not an unrealistic thing. 2 years ago,
Yes.
we didn't have police running around 24/7.
One
There
of
were
the-
hours we didn't have coverage.
Yeah, I went to a meeting one time and I heard the update was like, oh, surprise, we finally have 24/7 coverage.
Yeah, like
That
this,
wasn't long ago.
we're not.
Yeah, I was like, what?
We're not making this stuff up. Like there are literally times in our history where we didn't have police on call 24/7. We didn't have fire on call 24/7. Like this is not a joke. It's a reality. And it can be another reality if we grow residents without growing revenue.
Right, and we will grow residents regardless because
Correct.
it's already zoned.
I'm going to say one thing and then I'll let Mike, I'll let you have the last word on this. I was encouraged when I was at the planning commission meeting last night. I found it interesting. I think I represent like what you would call a younger crowd maybe, and there were a few people who spoke from that perspective.
Right.
But then there were also some people who are in the middle, I think, and a majority of the people who were against the zoning and wanted to slow things down were people who've been here for let's say like 20 years or so. But every single person who stood up who said, my family's been here for generations. We've been here for 60, 70, maybe sometimes more than that, years. All of them were in favor of just moving forward because you know why? Compared to where they were when they first came in here,
Yeah.
the town has already done what everyone's so scared of now.
Right.
They're like, look, there's a benefit now. Like they've already been through it and they actually see that it's not that bad. And they're saying, let's just keep going.
Plus, it's like money in the bank. So if you want me to close with something funny, I can give you something funny.
Yeah.
I'll throw a bone out to every NIMBY out there. when you go up to make public comments, stop reading off of the neg email blast. Just stop. Like
We've all seen it, by the way. You
Yeah.
think we haven't seen it? We actually have seen it.
that email goes to more people than you think it does.
Yeah.
We all see every email.
People have tried. I've been part of 2 movements in town already: the Insider Movement and the BN Movement. People have, on every step of the way, on every issue, there's at least 1 or 2 people that wanted to do a email blast to the supporters. And every single time I stepped in and said, "Don't do that," because it doesn't sound genuine. You sound like you're parroting an idea, and when you get proven wrong, your whole entire movement gets killed off. You can end it there.
All right, we'll end it there. Thanks for watching.